those would be like the tips, like just open your mind and start thinking beyond what you can do and think of different situations in which there are people who will not be able maybe to move during that activity. What's an alternative? Some people will not be able maybe to smell this scent. What would you do different? And that's what you can do.
Hello Sobat Kokamuhi! Welcome back to our podcast series where we talk about how to engage the community for a better earth. I'm Nikita, your host who will guide you in this conversation. And I think this episode is very interesting. We will talk about accessibility and inclusivity. As discussed in the previous podcast, everyone is authentic and we should support and appreciate each other authenticity. And in today's episode, we will discuss how to make project and material inclusive and accessible to all to support and appreciate everyone authenticity. As we know, we are from different nation, and yeah, we have our own uniqueness. And yeah, we are authentic for who we are, and no one is left behind. And in today's episode, we have a special guest from NASA again. Her name is Miss Rosalba. Miss Rosalba is the NASA Science Activation Outreach Coordinator at NASA Langley. She is also a dedicated leader in accessible science education. So let's welcome together Miss Rosalba. Hello, Miss Rosalba.
Hi, Nikita. It is so nice to be with you.
And I am happy to be with you. And how are you today?
I am great. I think this is such a special opportunity. I have never done a podcast, so be patient with me, but this is exciting.
And I want to let you know that Miss Rosalba is originally from Mexico, and Mexico is not a part of the United States, right? So Mexico is a country from North America, right? Is it true, Miss Rosalba? Oops. Hello, Sobat Kokamuhi! Welcome back to our podcast series where we talk about how to engage the community for a better earth. I'm Nikita, your host who will guide you in this conversation. So today episode is so special and interesting to me because we will talk about accessibility and inclusivity. So as discussed in the previous podcast, we know that everyone is authentic and we should support and appreciate each other authenticity. And in today's episode, we will discuss how to make project and material inclusive and accessible to all to support and appreciate everyone authenticity because we know that we are come from different nation and we have our own uniqueness, and so no one is left behind. So in today's episode we have a special guest from NASA again. Her name is Miss Rosalba, and Miss Rosalba is yeah hello. And Ms. Rosalba is the NASA Science Activation Outreach Coordinator at NASA Langley. She is also a dedicated leader in accessible science education. So let's welcome Ms. Rosalba together. Hello, Ms. Rosalba.
Hi, Nikita.
And
How are
how
you?
I'm good, and I feel really excited to talk and discuss this topic with you. And how about you?
I am great. I am excited. This is the first time ever that I am
Mm-hmm.
involved in a podcast. So be
Mm-hmm.
patient with me. But yeah, this is exciting. So thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah. And thank you too. And I also want to let you know that Miss Rosalba is originally from Mexico. So I from the information that I got, Mexico is not a part of the United States, but uh, it is a country in North America. Is that right, Miss Rosalba?
That is correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. But in the United States, we have New Mexico, right? One of the
Yes, there
city
is a
called
state in
Santa
the
Fe,
US.
right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Hmm.
And I saw that Mexico is a great country. Mexico has become home to many UNESCO heritage sites. And Miss Rosalba, what is the most interesting thing you found in Mexico, including maybe food or destination or the other thing?
Ooh, I love food. I am glad that you mentioned food because I do love food, and Mexican
Mm-hmm.
food is very, very diverse. I think something that is very interesting about Mexican food
Mm-hmm.
is that it
Mm-hmm.
combines so many different flavors into one dish. I don't know if you
Mm-hmm.
have heard, for example, about mole. It's a very famous Mexican dish, and so you have all this combination of different chiles, like different
Mm-hmm.
peppers, but it also has chocolate. So you have something that is
Mm-hmm.
spicy, but at the same time is kind of sweet. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Mexican food is really cool. I think another there are so many aspects of Mexican culture. Mexican culture is very, very rich. But I think
Mm-hmm.
if I had to choose something that is very interesting to me about
Mm-hmm.
Mexican culture, is that we tend to look for joy in every
Mm-hmm.
aspect of our life. So I feel like we Mexicans are very resilient. And I think part of that is that we look for happiness and for humor, even in tragic situations or in very difficult situations. We tend to look for ways to cope with joy. And also in the culture, like I think another thing that you may have heard of to illustrate our very joyful culture is the Day of the Dead
Mm-hmm.
tradition. So I don't know if you have
Mm-hmm.
heard about that, but it is a way in which Mexicans celebrate the lives of those loved ones who have passed away.
Oh
And
yeah.
so
Mm-hmm.
it could feel right like it's something like maybe sad or dark, but the truth is that
Mm-hmm.
we celebrate that with so much light and color and music and
Mm-hmm.
food and songs and poems, and so it's a very lively tradition.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, I think that is something that I really love about Mexican culture, that we again like tend to find joy in every aspect of our life.
Mm. It's great to hear that in Mexican culture, people are tend to find joyful thing, even though when people pass our family pass away, we try to figure out something light from music or the other tradition. Yeah, that's great thing to hear. And can you
Mhm.
tell us more about your culture in New Mexico during your childhood? What do you love in your culture during your childhood?
During my childhood, I think, like it's related to the same, like something that I really liked a lot also when I was very young was another tradition that has to do with
Mm-hmm.
the Three Kings.
Mm-hmm.
So in January, something that we do, January
Mm-hmm.
6th, the idea is that the kids write a letter to the
Mm-hmm.
three kings. So this is like
Mm-hmm.
related to religion. So then these are the three kings that visited baby Jesus.
Oh
But the
yeah.
idea with the kids is that we write this letter asking for presents. So something similar to Santa Claus in other countries.
Oh, okay, okay.
And but again, this is January 6th, and so we wake up and we find the presents from the three
Oh.
kings. But also, it's not just the kids that have this joyful moment. Also, the
Mhm,
adults and everyone participates in Three Kings celebrations because everybody gets together and we eat
mhm,
a cake.
mhm,
For that, it's like the rosca de reyes. That's how we call it. So it's like a cake with
mhm,
dried fruits
mhm,
and with some sugary parts, and it
mhm,
has like several plastic dolls hidden in the
mhm,
cake. So then you take like, well, everyone around the table takes a piece of the cake, and whoever
mhm,
gets one of those plastic dolls then has to buy tamales, which is another traditional food, and bring
mhm,
those tamales to everyone that was there at that party, but on February
mhm.
2nd. So, like I said, we just keep partying. Like Mexicans just like to celebrate
Yeah,
and party. So we keep
yeah.
the celebration going. So that's January 6th. And then whoever gets the dough has to buy tamales for February 2nd. So we just keep going. So that's one of
Oh,
it's one of my fun stories, that celebration every year.
that's fantastic. And yeah, sounds wonderful during your childhood. Gets the thing together and doing a fun thing and doing like party. And I'm curious about the local language in Mexico. Do you have any local language in New Mexico? And can you tell us about that? In Indonesia, we have more than 700 language. So local language. So in our tribes, there are a lot of language. So the elder generation still maintain that language and trying to pass the language to the young generation. And do you have this thing in your culture?
In Mexico, yes, there are many. Well, the official language is Spanish, and so that's what
Mm-hmm.
I always knew. All my family spoke Spanish, and most people speak Spanish, but there are also many indigenous languages. So, similar to Indonesia, there are many indigenous languages. For example, in Mexico City, one of those indigenous languages is Nahuatl. I have tried to learn at least the numbers from 1 to 10 in Nahuatl, but I have
Mm-hmm.
forgotten. They're very difficult. I find that the pronunciation is very difficult, but even in the language or the Spanish language that we speak in Mexico, we have borrowed many words that come from Nahuatl. So,
Mm-hmm.
like, I would like to find you a list, but like, we do have many words that come from Nahuatl, and there are many also names of places that we go to often
Mm-hmm.
that have Nahuatl names. So like one of them, like just as an example, is Nezahualcóyotl. So they tend to be like very long words,
Mm-hmm.
and many of them end in like tl, which is not like,
Mm-hmm.
in my opinion, not supernatural, not a supernatural sound, like Nezahualcóyotl, like Xochitl, things like that. So
Little.
it's
Okay.
a tricky language, I think, but I don't know it. But yeah, so I always spoke Spanish growing up.
Mm-hmm. But I heard that you love learning Japanese language too, right?
Yes, I started learning Japanese when I was a teenager.
Mm-hmm.
I guess, like, like being in Mexico, again, most people will learn Spanish, and then the second language will generally be English, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, some people then learn French, like
Mm-hmm.
if you like languages, or if you go to a school where they teach other languages, maybe they will teach you French or possibly German. I wanted to learn something completely different. So
Okay.
I just thought, I'm going to learn Japanese. And
Okay.
I found that very interesting. So I started learning when I was a teenager. And recently, maybe about, I don't know, 6 months ago, I went back to it. So I am
Mm-hmm.
learning it again. Now my son
Mm-hmm.
also got interested. He found me studying Japanese. He
Mm-hmm.
saw what I was doing. He's like, that looks interesting. So now he's also learning Japanese. So yeah, I just
Okay.
like languages, I guess. But
Yeah,
yeah,
that's so much fun.
At some point, I was when I was still in Mexico, I was working for a Swiss company, and
Mm-hmm.
in Switzerland there are like four official languages, and one of them is German. And so the people that I used to work with spoke
Mm-hmm.
German, really Swiss German, but anyway. And so I started also learning a little bit of German. So I do like languages in
Mm-hmm.
general.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I can speak little bit Japanese. So like
Oh,
konnichiwa, watashi no namae wa Nikita desu. Yoroshiku onegai shimasu.
oh well, so that was perfect. What's the
And I can
Yoroshiku?
yoroshiku onegai shimasu. And I can do little bit Spanish language. So hola, mi nombre Nikita, gracias.
Ah, mucho gusto.
Yeah. And
That's
I
great.
know some word in Spanish. Abuela and abuelo, grandmother and grandfather, right?
Those are very important words, yes.
Yeah.
I love that. You
Abuela
know,
and
those are very
abuelo.
important words. Also, I
Mhm,
think in Mexican culture, that's also part of Mexican culture that I love. I am like,
mhm,
you just saying those words like brought that back to me. Like, that is a very important part of our culture, that like family is so important, not just like mom and dad, but like the
mhm,
extended family is very important in Mexico.
mhm,
So the whole family gets together. Sometimes they live to or very often they live together. So if
mhm,
you go to an event, you come with the mom, the dad, the grandpa, the grandma, the aunt, the uncle, the cousins. So yeah,
mhm.
that's another very important thing.
Yeah, in some Mexican cultural movie or cartoon like Casa Grande or Coco, I say that yeah, family is important part in their life and they having a lot of joy using party or the other thing. So that's very nice to know about yeah, Mexican culture from you. And yeah, how do you feel about learning more than one language? Like you said before, you for your first language is Spanish, and then you learn English, you learn Germany, and also Japan. How do you feel you can maybe speak a little bit the other language and learn more the other language?
I love it. I love
Mm-hmm,
languages because I think
mm-hmm,
they are one of the main ways in which you can learn about the culture, about another country.
mm-hmm,
I was always very interested in learning about other cultures, like
mm-hmm,
knowing how other people think, like trying to get different perspectives, kind of
mm-hmm,
seeing the world from different points of view. And so I do
mm-hmm,
think that through language, you can start doing that. So, and it is really rewarding when you can communicate with other people in their language.
mm-hmm,
So,
mm-hmm.
yeah, I
Yeah.
love it.
Yeah, it's like language is a media to know about the other culture, right? The other people culture, right? Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Okay, so Miss Rosalba, so I know that your first language is Spanish, and then but you moved to the United States where the communication use English. And I saw in the YouTube that at the first time you landed in the United States, you feel stressful because of like language barrier, right? So how did you overcome the language barrier in this process?
So I had studied English when I was still in Mexico. So I had the grammar background, but
Mm-hmm.
what was very difficult was to understand English when it was actually spoken really fast by native
Yeah.
speakers of English once in the United
Mm-hmm.
States. And it was just, like you said, super stressful. I was working in an IT help desk at that time. So that made things worse because I had to take the phone calls of basically people that sometimes were upset that their computer was not working and they were speaking really fast. And so it was
uh,
very hard to understand them. So I would say the first couple of weeks, I would just like literally just pass the phone to one of my colleagues. I was like, help me, because I just could
okay.
not understand anything. But I guess that same pressure is what made me learn really quickly. I had no choice. So, and I was then immersed in the English language environment all day.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had to, I guess, like my ears got used to, um, the sounds very, very quickly. And so then I just had to keep going. But yeah, the beginning
Mm-hmm.
was really frightening.
Yeah. But so the our environment make us adaptable with the environment, right? Because your environment use the English language, then you can adaptive with the time and time goes, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's a great story. And yeah, let's go back to your profile. So you take the specialist in accessibility in science education, right? And I'm curious about what made you decide to take a specialty in accessible at global learning and observation to benefit Earth program and other NASA programs.
So I will say it's not like I have an official title as an accessibility specialist or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
I have taken, I guess, the initiative of learning as much as I can about accessibility because I care. And I have been fortunate that the NASA team where I work,
Mm-hmm.
our team lead and
Mm-hmm.
all my colleagues have welcomed learning about accessibility. Our team lead is also an advocate of accessibility. And
Mm-hmm.
so she has empowered me to continue
Mm-hmm.
learning and to share about accessibility with the team, even though it's not
Mm-hmm.
like an official role.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so, what made me start, like, getting so interested was actually a globe experience. So
Oh,
I
okay.
started, yeah, so I started working with a mentor in air quality for Globe. So
Okay.
she leads teachers and student teams in doing research about air
Mm-hmm.
quality with Globe.
Mm-hmm.
And when she was my mentor, she was trying to get more schools to participate in air quality
Mm-hmm.
student research
Mm-hmm.
campaigns. And I asked her if I could invite a school that was near my home. And she was like,
Mm-hmm.
sure, like you can just invite, more schools. And so the school that came to mind was a school for deaf students. And I had never been inside that school. I had actually never interacted with somebody who was deaf.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know, like I just felt like, well, I would like to go to the school and see if these students could participate in this Globe Air Quality campaign. And
Mm-hmm.
so I went to the school.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, like I knocked the door and I was like, like I am working at NASA with this mentor. We're trying to do this air quality research,
Mm-hmm.
and I would love to collaborate with this school.
Mm-hmm.
So then somebody put me in contact with one of the teachers of a high
Mm-hmm.
school group in this school. The name of the school is Lexington School for the Deaf. And so I communicated with this teacher and she was like, yes, I will be happy. Like the Globe program looks really, really amazing. Like she started like looking at the information on the website and she was like, this sounds like a great opportunity for my students. Let's do it. So then I went to her classroom. So she invited me to her classroom. And again, like this school is for students who are deaf or hard of hearing.
Mm-hmm.
And so the teacher, her name is Gillian Anderson, and she's amazing. She's hearing, thankfully, because it didn't even occur to me. Like, of course, there are
Mm-hmm.
teachers who are also deaf in the school, and it didn't even occur to me that I didn't even know how to communicate in American
Mm-hmm.
Sign Language or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I got to the class, and Gillian started introducing me to the students. So the students who were all either deaf or hard of hearing, they would start
Mm-hmm.
introducing themselves to me. So they would
Mm-hmm.
use American Sign Language and Gillian would
Mm-hmm.
interpret for me. Or some of
Mm-hmm.
them would use English.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and I felt so bad because I realized how ignorant I was, like I didn't even think like, okay, I should at least learn how to introduce myself or say hello,
Mhm.
anything in American Sign Language. I felt awful because again,
Mhm.
like my level of ignorance was just outrageous. So
Mhm.
right after that meeting with these
Mhm.
students, the same day I went back home and I started
Mhm.
looking for American Sign Language classes because I was like, this is just
Wow.
like, how did I do this? So I
Mm.
started looking for American Sign Language lessons. I asked the teacher, Jillian, if she could recommend schools to learn American Sign Language. And I enrolled myself. Like that day, I enrolled myself in lessons. I enrolled my son too. So I was like, it is good
Mhm.
for him to start learning from a young age
Mhm.
about, like other ways to communicate. And
Mhm.
so I started taking those classes. And in the classes, all my teachers were also deaf. And
Mhm.
so they also taught us about deaf culture. So I started
Mhm.
learning about the culture of deaf people. And
Mhm.
I also started learning about all the struggles that
Mhm.
they have to go through every day just because
Mhm.
we hearing people do not even realize or we don't
Mhm.
do anything to make things more accessible to them.
Mhm.
So I remember, like, in one of the classes, I actually ended up crying you know,
Mhm.
because our teacher told us, like, for example, she would, like, how, like, every day or, like, very often she would go to a store and try to
Mhm.
order her food, like, by using texts because, she's
Mhm.
completely deaf. And the people get annoyed at her, and some people make fun of her. And
Mhm.
it really broke my heart. And so that experience of being with teachers who are deaf, with students who are deaf, and realizing all the struggles that they go through just because we hearing people don't even realize what they have to go through, that's that was a life-changing experience for me.
Mhm.
And that was really what motivated me to start learning about accessibility so that I
Mhm.
could make at least my best effort to make things more accessible for other people.
Yeah,
Sorry that
that's
I said
really
it was so long. I'm sorry.
no, no, no. That was really great story that we as a human don't sometimes ignorance don't really care about people with special need. But people with special need also they are special for themselves and they can do something in this earth. And your story is inspiring because you are trying to help the others and trying to making the thing also accessible for them so they got like equality for learning and studying. So that's such a
Um,
great story.
and I do think that I want to add, I have nothing but respect for
Mhm.
people, for deaf people and for their
Mhm.
culture. And I do also want to say that by no means I think of them as, like kind of like needing me or having an impairment. I think that is also very important for me to highlight
Mhm.
about deaf culture. It is very important to understand that
Mhm.
they are not impaired and that they are just as successful and they have everything to be
Mhm.
successful. But the world the way that the majority of people create it can be
Mhm.
inaccessible, for them.
Mhm.
But they are amazing. They have all the skills just like everyone else. And it
Mhm.
is, I think it is us that just have to think about how the world has to provide different routes to
Mhm.
access information and to
Mhm.
access things. But it's not
Mhm.
that like they are missing. They are perfect the way they are, is what I want to say. Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes. And sometimes this happen in our maybe in our school. So people tend to think that one material fit for all the student, but our student is unique for they are. They has their own study module or study model, but Sometimes people that if they cannot study with this module, people say that they're not smart enough and the other thing. But the thing is, everyone is special, everyone is authentic for themselves, and everyone is amazing. They just need to find their way. They just need to, yeah, make their own way. And what you say is real. I really agree. I really agree with what you say. And talking about accessibility and inclusivity, uh, from your perspective, how do you define accessibility and inclusivity?
I think accessibility has to do precisely what with what you were mentioning before, with making sure that we design and implement things that can be used by everyone or by
Mhm,
as much people as possible, by providing different avenues or routes or ways to access information or to access a building or to, like, to use things. It's about making sure that there are different ways in which
mhm,
you can use something or enter something. So I think you agree with me. It is not that a student has a problem. It is us that are creating a problem, but not providing or not designing activities or materials in a way in which there are different routes to access that material or to use that
mhm,
material. So I
mhm,
think it's about that. It's about thinking and designing things so that there are different ways to use them or enter them. And I think it's related to inclusion. I think inclusion is about making sure that everyone can use, again, like something, a material, or that can enter a place. But it's also about making sure that all voices are heard,
mhm,
that everyone's perspectives are actually
mhm,
considered.
mhm,
And I can give you an example because I thought about the previous podcast. I was watching the podcast that you did with Miss Marile Colon Robles.
mhm,
So, as you know,
mhm,
I am part of her team, of the
mhm,
Globe Clouds team with her. And I will give you an example of inclusion that is like very practical. She's
okay.
an example of being an inclusive person.
Mhm,
Last year, at the end of last year, Miss Marile attended a
mhm,
conference
mhm,
in, I think it was in Washington, D.C.
mhm,
And I could not attend that meeting. So I was, home in New York. The topics in the conference related to our whole team, right? So she was
mhm,
physically in the meeting. And then all of a sudden at home, I started getting all the emails from Miss Marile introducing me to the people that she was meeting at the conference in
mhm,
Washington, D.C. Like she was
mhm,
telling them about me, like, oh, Rosalba is also interested in this. Maybe you can chat with her too. Or like if she was in an actual presentation, she would raise her
mhm,
hand and she would be like, oh, my colleague Rosalba also has an idea about that. So I would like you to know about that. It was incredible because even though I
mhm.
was so far away, I was not physically in the conference. I felt like I was in the conference because she was so
Oh,
inclusive.
yeah.
She never forgot about me. It's like she
Mhm,
took me,
mhm,
like she took my soul with her to the
mhm,
conference, and through her she let me interact with everyone. So I think that is
mhm.
what inclusion is, like making sure that every voice is heard, even if you have limitations. Like me, I was not physically in the meeting. She still found a way to include me in the meeting.
Yeah. That is the tangible example and really great example about accessibility and inclusivity. The important thing is uh we should not ignorance people. We need to care and remember people. So yeah, everyone voice is included in one thing or one project.
Yeah, yeah.
And let's go into the GLOBE program. So GLOBE program really concerned about accessibility, right? And I heard that they are really care about languages and about people in special need. But my question is actually in which aspect of accessibility are the GLOBE concerned with?
So the GLOW program actually has several working groups
Mm-hmm.
that give advice and that work in different initiatives. So, for example,
Mm-hmm.
there is a working group that has to do with technology, another one that has to do with science, another one for
Mm-hmm.
education. So, there is one that is dedicated to diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility.
Mm-hmm.
And so, accessibility is really huge. There are so many things that we
Okay.
have to consider to make things accessible.
Mm-hmm.
This year, what this working group is focused on, so my colleagues who are from different countries and I are working on some specific initiatives. So we have
Mm-hmm.
to basically focus on something so that we start achieving some results. So I can tell you about a couple of those initiatives. One of them has to do with languages. You were talking about languages before. So
Mm-hmm.
we have this idea of having language ambassadors. So the
Mm-hmm.
GLOBE program, as you also know, is international. So we have community members that speak many languages, many different languages.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes the materials, or many times, the materials are only available in English. And
Mm-hmm.
therefore, they can be difficult to understand by other
Mm-hmm.
members of the community. So, what the Globe Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Accessibility Working Group is trying to do is launch these language ambassadors initiative
Mm-hmm.
so that we have people also in the community who are proficient in different languages who can help those community members who are not proficient in English. So, for example, one of the members in our group, she speaks Croatian, French, Italian, and English. So she can volunteer to help those in the community who maybe speak Croatian but not so much English and who have difficulty understanding the materials. She will be able to be that bridge between those instructional materials, the glove protocols, and those people who cannot access the materials in English so easily. So that's one of the things that we're trying to do. Another one has to do with trying to make earth science more accessible to people who are blind or with low vision. And
Mm-hmm.
so, what we're working on, and again, this is an international team, we're trying to put together a proposal to host, well, to organize and host an international conference
Mm-hmm.
to mobilize knowledge about how
Mm-hmm.
to make earth science more accessible to people who are blind or low vision. So we want to bring
Mm-hmm.
experts and also to bring the community, students, students who are blind or with low vision, and the teachers who serve these student populations, so that we can come together and find better ways and share about better ways to make materials and to make lessons and activities more accessible to these people.
Wow, that's very nice story. So one thing that the Globe concerned about is the language because we know that Globe is international community organization. So sometimes people are not really has difficulty when the material delivered in English. Instead of that, the other people voluntarily trying to give the material in Italian or Russian. And I saw in your material with Miss Marile Coron Robles, you did the giving the material with the Spanish, right? With Miss Marile.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, Miss Marile and I have worked a lot in translating glove materials to Spanish. Yes,
Mm-hmm,
which
yeah.
is always a pleasure. I love doing that.
Mm-hmm. And because that's your first language,
Yeah.
it will be
Yeah,
It would be the exciting thing to do.
it is. Yes.
Your first language. And the other thing
Mhm.
is your team help the blind people to get accessible with the material. And I read a blog, I think you wrote this, titled Student Intern Uses Technology and Creativity to Show How Blind and Sighted Students Can Study Cloud Together. And can you share with us about this inspiring project? Because I think this is very inspiring.
I would love to. Yes, my team and I were very, very fortunate to
Mm-hmm,
work with a high school student. She was
mm-hmm,
interning with us. Her name is Nadia. A couple years ago, and so Nadia worked on finding these different ways to do cloud research. And so Nadia is blind, and she found three, or she worked with three different ways to do
mm-hmm,
cloud research that could be used together with students who are blind and students who are sighted. And so one of them had to do with using an app that is called Be My Eyes.
mm-hmm,
And so what that app does is that somebody who is blind can use the app to make a call. So then there is like a pool of volunteers
mm-hmm,
who are waiting to get a call. And so then a person who is sighted will get the call, and then the person who is blind can ask to describe something or to read something. And so the person who is sighted will do that for the person who is blind over the phone.
mm-hmm,
So we had a collection of cloud pictures
mm-hmm,
that were in a project called NASA Globe Cloud Gaze. So those were pictures of the sky that had been
mm-hmm,
taken by citizen scientists
mm-hmm,
that needed to be described to see what type of cloud was there. So what
mm-hmm,
happened was that Noria would use the Be My Eyes app to
mm-hmm,
call the person who is sighted. And so the
mm-hmm,
person would describe, for example, like, well, I see clouds that are puffy. And then Nadia,
mm-hmm,
because she had already studied about the different types of clouds, if she heard puffy, then she would know, oh, then that's a cumulus cloud. She
mm,
would give
yeah.
like based on her knowledge about clouds, she would tell the sighted person, like, do you
Mm-hmm,
think that they are like in layers? Do you think that they are very thin or like wispy?
mm-hmm,
And then
mm-hmm,
based on the description of the person who was sighted, then Nadia would know if they were cumulus or they were stratus or they were cirrus, and then she
mm-hmm,
would be able to classify the clouds. And so that actually helped the sighted people also remember how to classify clouds, because they would not even know the names. They would just be like, well, they're wispy. And then Noria would be able to tell them, well, then that means that that is a cirrus cloud. And then the people
mm-hmm,
would like, oh, remember like from their classes, right? Like before, like, oh,
mm-hmm,
yes, you're right. The wispy clouds are cirrus clouds. So there was a
mm-hmm,
collaboration that way. Another way that that Noria was doing some research about clouds had to do with using audio description
oh,
for
yeah, I know.
scientific videos. So there
Mm-hmm,
are some videos that have all these visuals. You know, science videos happen to have a lot of visuals to describe the concepts. And so that can be then an issue, you know, when you cannot see the visuals
mm-hmm,
on the video, you're just hearing, then you can
mm-hmm,
miss a lot of information.
mm-hmm,
So what we did with Nadia is that a student who is sighted would describe the visuals of the video, and then
mm-hmm,
Nadia would review that audio description to see if it even made sense to her. So when there were parts that were confusing to her, then she would go back, ask questions until the audio description was more understandable. So for the
mm-hmm,
audio description, what we used was a website that is called You Describe. So basically,
mm-hmm,
what you can do there for free is that you can take any YouTube video and
Mhm.
enter your voice describing what is happening on that video for that reason,
Mhm.
so that people who are blind or with low vision, who cannot access the visual information with their eyes, they can get it with their hearing. They can hear what
Mhm.
is happening on the video.
Mm, yeah.
And the third thing that Nadia did was a tactile cloud identification
Mhm.
chart. So, because she had already studied about all the different features of different types of clouds, she had already
Mhm.
kind of like a mental representation of what clouds would look like.
Mhm.
And like if you could touch them, what they would feel like if you could do that. And so
Mhm.
she went to a store with many, well, not a store, I don't know, a place where they had like many different kinds of materials.
Mhm.
And she went like touching and touching different materials until
Mhm.
she found the materials that would make sense to her to
Mhm.
represent different kinds of clouds. So she made a
Mhm.
beautiful tactile chart, like with feathers and pebbles and marbles, and she even put lights in them. I don't know.
Mhm.
So she found all these different materials to represent clouds in a way that made sense to her. And so she found that that was a very good activity, because then if you could explain to students who are blind what are the features of different types of clouds, then they could have that opportunity of exploring different materials and seeing,
Mhm.
like I feel, like what could represent those features better to each of them. So, so that's
Mhm.
what she did. And it was a really great experience to work with her.
Mhm. Yeah. It's looks like she is very smart and motivated student.
Definitely, we learned a lot from her.
Mm.
Yes.
Yeah, she is a very inspiring person. And her story is so amazing. And one thing that come up suddenly to my head is about the contribution of art. So I know that you are your background is also informatic system, right? So
Mm-hmm.
you learn about yeah, something like information technology and um artificial intelligence become a huge conversation in this era, and now we have like image processing model and the other thing to help uh determining what image it is. And I think one day maybe there are a classification for clouds from the AI. But what do you think about how AI can contribute to people with special needs, especially for blind people? Because from AI there are camera. I know that one of the camera is ESP, 3.2 cam from Arduino, so they can scan the thing and they can determine the image, and maybe they can convert it in sound or in text. But what do you think? Just it is just opinion discussion. But I'm so curious about that.
I mean, I think, yeah, like I think artificial intelligence is starting to help in many ways
Mm-hmm.
in that regard. And if you even look at how, like, if you're using a document, or a spreadsheet or a presentation, like say a Word
Mm-hmm.
document or a PowerPoint presentation, when you insert an image, if you don't do anything to it,
Mm-hmm.
the program itself is going to actually add some alternative text, which is meant precisely to do what you were describing. Like if there is a person that is blind and is going to try to access that document,
Mm-hmm.
the program, Word or PowerPoint, they're trying to give this kind of alternative text so that the person who is blind will know or have an
Mm-hmm.
idea of what that image is. So if you don't do anything,
Mm-hmm.
that is what the programs are already starting to do, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, maybe you put a picture of a person and it will say like person smiling at the camera or something like that. So it's
Yeah,
starting
yeah.
to do that. However, we're not quite there yet. Like those
Mm-hmm.
descriptions are still not, in many cases, they're still not sufficient. And so we
Mhm.
still need human intervention. So that is something
Mhm.
that, for example, my team and I do all the time. Like we make sure that we add that alternative text to each image so that they are
Mhm.
accessible to people who are blind. And so we see the one that was just automatically generated by the program. And sometimes
Mhm.
it may be enough, but for the most part, we still need to have that human intervention to have a much more comprehensive description of the image. So
Mhm.
I think you're right. I think computers are starting to, or have started for some time, to detect these visual images and to attempt to describe them. So I think they're
Mhm.
getting better. Right now, I feel like we still have to check that
Yeah, yeah.
alternative time and add a much more comprehensive description. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I'm really agree with you. Some AI or other technology can help us, but we as a human is really special because we have given a gift with our own sensor, like our skin, our eyes, our ear, and yeah, the most important thing is we get the sense in our emotion. We can feel sad, we can feel happy and the other thing, and that's the special thing about human. And yeah, we need human in any time and every time.
Yeah.
Yeah, talking about accessibility again, can you share some tips for our audience who want to create a material that is accessible to all? What's your tips that you want to give?
Um, Yes, so like I said before, you do have to consider many things. I think what you should keep in mind at all times, like the most important thing that you have to keep in mind is that
Mm-hmm.
you have to provide multiple routes to access
Mm-hmm.
your material. So think like if you could not see the image that you're adding, how
Mm-hmm.
could somebody access that? If you could not
Mm-hmm.
hear the audio in
Mm-hmm.
the video that you're adding, then what would you need? If
Mm-hmm.
you could not touch something in the material that like that in an activity, then what would be the alternative? I think that is the
Mm-hmm.
key, like to start like opening your mind as to stop focusing just on you. If you have all your
Mm-hmm.
senses, like stop focusing on that and start thinking, like if I did not have my sight, if I didn't have my hearing, if I didn't have my touch or my smell or whatever, like what would I do? Which is great because you start becoming very creative. Some
Mm-hmm.
like quick tips, like we said, like if you add images, make sure that you add alternative text,
Mm-hmm.
which usually is just a right click and then you're going to find the alternative text
Mm-hmm.
box, and then you
Mm-hmm.
can enter a comprehensive description of what you want to convey with that image.
Mm-hmm.
If you add a video, make sure that it has captions and
Mm-hmm.
also audio description, like we said. Otherwise, like imagine if you could not see, then what?
Mm-hmm.
What would you like a voice to tell you, to describe for you to understand what is happening? Or like if you could not hear, like again, you need the captions then, right? So that you know what is being said in the video. So I think those would be like the tips, like just open your mind and start thinking beyond what you can do and think of different situations in which there are people who will not be able maybe to move during that activity. What's an alternative? Some people will not be able maybe to smell this scent. What would you do different? And that's what you can do.
Yeah, that's a great thing. Think beyond what we can do. That's a really great word. I think what I can share with you is I have a community, the community work on raising the awareness of the urban hit island. But there are some case that people are really people start struggling with the terminology, because when we talk about urban hit island, what is the urban hit island? And then we go next about the NDVI and the other thing, people just have uh empty like they don't know what to think. But when we try starting to think like them, that we think that we are from different backgrounds, so we have like we need to make sure that the material accessible for everyone. So we have illustration. We tend we create the urban hit island like the often that we have the city inside, so it becomes hotter and hotter, something like that. So people will more become understand with the material. And when the webinar we say that we have our audiences from different backgrounds, so sometimes we need to simplify the terminology. And when we create the webinar, and when the webinar is understandable and make the word as simple as possible, so the audience will understand and be curious, and they ask a lot of questions because that is accessible for them and understandable for them. And yeah, what you say before is really inspiring, and that's so wonderful to hear that.
And I think what you said too is so important. Like you also brought up that like you should not assume that other people have the same background knowledge, right? And so that's why you were
Mm-hmm.
talking about simplifying the language. That is also super
Mm-hmm.
important. There are some times in which I see a website that has like different versions and it says like, well, there has some like basic information, some intermediate, some advanced. And I think that's good because then if you want more detail, if you have more background information about the topic, you may want to read some more advanced information. But if you still,
Mm-hmm.
if the topic is new to you, you need something more basic. Otherwise, you will not
Mm-hmm.
understand anything. So I do think that what you said is also super important. Make sure that you provide simplified versions of the topic, and to stop assuming once again, like open your mind and don't assume that people know what you already know or that people have all the senses that you have. Like start thinking of different ways in which you can present the information or that you can handle an activity so that more people can engage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a important value and thing that we need to keep in our head. And yeah, thank you so much, Miss Rosalba, for sharing all the thing and your ex from your experience, and then your culture and the other positive thing. Hopefully, I think our audience is happy to hear about this because yeah, all people included in this conversation. But do you have any advice that you want to say with the youth or the young generation because they are the future leader? Mm-hmm.
um I think the same advice, like to always try to think of the needs of others, like try to not just focus on yourself, try to
Mm-hmm.
open, your perspective, your point of view, look around and see what other people need
Mm-hmm.
and try to be that voice. Like if there are some people that maybe need something special or some extra help, you can be that
Mm-hmm.
voice too. You can advocate. You have a lot of power, so you can definitely make a difference for many people around you. So do your best to help in any way you can.
Yes, that's wonderful. And thank you once again, Miss Rosalba. And I will also want to thank you to our audience that watched this video. Hopefully, through this video, you can attract the positive thing. And yeah, we
Well, thank
all
you.
yes, and we also want to remind you to remind our audience to yeah stay tuned with our podcast because we will try to make the other podcast that also inspire you. And before we close this podcast, so we want to do yeah the jargon that we also do. So yeah, Miss Rosalba, are you ready? So when I count
I am
one, two,
ready.
three, I will say salam and then we say superhéroe. Okay,
I'm
let's
ready.
count. Let's do it. One, two, three. Salam,
Superhéroe.
superhéroe. Yeah. Oh yeah. Um, Miss Rosalba, can you share with us the American sign to say thank you? So maybe the audience also can. Okay, thank you. So
Thank you.
okay. So thank you for our audience and thank you so much, Miss Rosalba. Okay. And see you then for Sobat Ko Kamu here, our audience. See you next time. Bye bye.